When you were younger, did you have like a whole plan laid out on how your life would look like when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you got there and you're like, this is not what I imagined? Welcome to the Noir Poise podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto. It's our way of life. When you were younger, did you have like a whole plan laid out on how your life would look like when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you got there and you're like, this is not what I imagined? Yeah, me too, sis. Or bro. Me too.
Yeah.
I think that's a situation that often occurs. Like we make plans when we're young and we think we got all the right answers. Not necessarily the right answers, but we have everything laid out. And we're like, I'm going to do this, and this is what I want to be. This is where I see myself working. This is how many kids I want. This is da-da-da-da-da. And then time goes on. You evolve. You grow up, and you realize, let's switch it up a little bit. I've been there. I think I'm still there. If I'm honest, definitely still there. I actively say sometimes like, this is not what I saw in my life at this age, but you're grateful still and you learn to be content. But let's talk about the realities of going through that and going through phases of feeling stuck and not knowing how to move forward because everything that you envisioned is not going as planned, or it could be a situation where you realize like, oh snap, I had it all wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This actually isn't the right way. I should be doing this, or I should have been doing that. So moving from that, how do we do that? How do we move forward from that?
One of the reasons why I think we find ourselves in this particular situation is we were given a dream versus creating our own dream. So when you think about it, since we were young, they told us, go to school, go to college, especially in the Caribbean household, is either doctor, lawyer, engineer, or nurse or something.
Right.
So we were given a dream, and I don't think we had the opportunity to find ourselves.
Right.
So it's different when you're living your own dream versus living a dream that was given to you. Because if it's your own dream, you could kind of feel your way through it, build your blueprint as you go. But when you're living someone else's dream and not having the right guidance, I think it just destroys a lot of... Well, destroys the wrong word, because I think there is still hope. But it puts you in a place where you have to start wondering, how did I get here?
Yeah, you kind of have to like take a couple steps back in order to like move forward. Yeah, and that's unfortunate because I think that is all too common. People get into careers and they realize as they're in it or as they're about to complete the degree that that's not where they want to be.
Yeah.
We're starting to see it now within our generation where people are leaving the workforce to accomplish their dreams or the things that they're actually into. And I think this is probably part of it. I don't think it's the only thing, but I think this is probably part of it. Like you said, we didn't have guidance and we didn't have the time to explore our identity.
Right.
And you get to a point like when you're in your late 20s and 30s and you're just like, yeah, I actually don't really like this. Why am I doing this?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I said this in an episode before, but that was something that I went through heavy in my 20s. I always thought I wanted to be a physician. And I think it was my junior year of college. And I was like, oh, snap, this is not it. But it was implanted in my mind that if I love to help people, then it had to look like this type of image. And so for me, I was like, if I like helping people, the only way to help people is in the healthcare field. Nonetheless, I enjoy the healthcare field. I just had to realize that like, I also enjoy the concept of becoming a mom and being a wife and being active in my children's life. That was one of the things that I had told you that I was like, becoming the type of physician that I was going for was figuring out how to have that work-life balance just wouldn't be a reality.
Right.
As much as like we hear it all the time in corporate where they tell us have a work-life balance, make time for loved ones, make time for yourself, self-care, self-care, self-care. The older I get, the more I realize that it's almost unrealistic. I'm not saying it's not possible.
Yeah.
I think it definitely is possible, but we have to think of the reality of the majority. it's possible when you have like a support system, you have a team, you have, people who are helping out where you can do that. But the reality for people our age right now is you don't have it. You don't have it. And it's really hard to afford an adequate support system. The most that you probably can afford this day and age for most people is a nanny, right? But then you got to come home and do other, do things and whatever the case is. So finding the balance between career and home is just, I think that was even like laid out incorrectly for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's impossible, like you said.
Yeah.
But I don't think the system was set up to have a healthy work-life balance while maintaining, a home. Because so many of the jobs out there are not just regular 9-to-5 jobs.
Yeah.
You go in an hour earlier. Sometimes you have to stay in an hour later. And that's not factoring in traffic and, all the miscellaneous stuff prepping, all the miscellaneous stuff that goes into that. Like in my career, there was a moment when I realized that as messed up as this sounds, there's almost no point of me trying to climb the ladder. And we've heard people say this all the time, especially being, especially with the color of your skin. It's frustrating to watch people who are less qualified than you are climb up the ladder.
Like this.
Faster,
like so quick.
Easier.
Yeah.
And I think the final blow for me was there was a job that someone reached out to me about a role, and the role wasn't available online. But then they said, here's the offer, but I need you to go and apply to this role online, for legal purposes. And that actually showed me how all the roles were kind of already filled before you see it. Or not all the roles, but most of them.
Yeah, most.
And it made me understand how the corporate world works, where sometimes they make it seem like you can climb up the ladder. We go on job interviews all the time and they promise you, in 1 to 2 years, you'll get this promotion or whatever the case is. But realistically, they have their own plans, they have their own ideas, and they just need you to kind of work.
Give your all.
Yeah, give your all, and they promise you, they say work for the job you want, not for the job you have.
Don't believe that crap.
Yeah, I don't believe
you
that.
You taught me that actually. Yeah. Don't believe
it's
that.
Like, how about you pay me for the job that you want me to do? And we leave it at that. But when that happened to me, I was thankful that, that I got the position. But it also showed me how that company works, where you'll give the illusion that you're looking for people when in reality you already have
people filled.
Yeah, people filled.
The spots filled, I should say. Yeah, that's 100% true, because I've told you this too. Like, being in management, that is something that happens. It happens regularly and it's messed up, 100% messed up. But I see both sides, because at the end of the day, and I think that's what people forget, is these are businesses.
Yeah.
They have to do what's best for them. So if you choose not to do what's best for you, that's not their fault. That's your fault. And that's one thing I had to accept too, because I was one of those workers that was like, I'd go in early, stay late, because the positions required it most times, not taking lunch to get the work done because you want to climb up the ladder and you want to be in a certain position. So you want to show them that you're capable, or they put you on miscellaneous projects because they know that you want to grow, and use the motivation by saying, this is going to give you the experience that you're looking for. When in reality, they're like, no, I'm just getting you to do the work I need done for free. So you end up working like 3 different roles within your one role. And that was what was occurring for me in corporate, was I was constantly being overworked, underpaid.
Yeah.
And the work-life balance just wasn't a reality if I wanted to be as active as I envisioned myself being in my children's lives. But I remember one thing you told me, you were just like, why are you doing this? And that's another topic. But I think there's a level of like validation, I think, that's there, especially coming from a Caribbean home and you're the first generation. We try to overachieve so much that we don't realize that it stems from a trauma. And I had to realize that when I heard someone else say it in conversation, how oftentimes we act that way. We want to achieve. We want to build so much and move up the ladder so fast, and we're overworking ourselves, not giving time to actually like live and be present. It's often from trauma. And that's one thing I had to accept, that like all these hours of working and not getting sleep. And then you got to remember, a lot of people our age are also trying to build businesses on the side. Yeah. They're trying to like fulfill passions and do things. And it's just like, bro, is it worth it? That's really what I ask myself now. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not telling y'all don't do it. It's not what I'm saying. But for myself, I started questioning, is it worth it? Am I going to look back at my life and say, I was this title and I made this amount of money and this, that, and the third? Or am I going to want to look back at my life and be like, and hear my child say, Mom was home.
Yeah.
I remember seeing, like, she was with me. You know what I mean? So that's what helped me make the decision that, like, yeah, corporate really isn't worth it for me. Now, again, to each his own. It's not worth it. If I have to be in it, of course, but I've learned that it's been customized to make you choose corporate over family without you recognizing it.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't notice it. We think like, because think about someone working 9 to 5, the standard hours, right? You work 9 to 5. You probably have to leave your house around like 8-ish to get there on time. You probably get home maybe like 6:30, depending on the traffic in your area. And depending on the age of your children, I assume if they're school age, their bedtime is around like 8, maybe on average. It could be a little later, could be a little earlier, depending on the age range, but on average 8. So you get home around 6:30, you got what?
Yeah.
1.5, 2 hours with your kid 5 days a week. And they've literally made us believe that this is normal. Sometimes we got to stop and think, is it?
Yeah, it's definitely not normal. To what you just said, or what you were saying about the whole working overtime and, you know, putting your all. I actually started to see somewhat of a cultural shift between men and women. So we say here all the time, you know, men get the promotions and raises because they're willing to work later, you know, finish the proposal, whatever the case is. But I started to realize that it's the women doing that now. No, I'm
Maybe
saying
like back in the day.
back in the day,
That's
that's
our
right.
generation.
That's right. And I still hear people say
been,
that
yeah.
In current modern times, where men are more willing to miss, you know, their daughter's recital or you know, personal things to meet deadlines at work. That's not to say that's not the case, but one of the reasons why I think corporate hires so much women is they know the women will put their all into it.
Goes back to the validation thing.
Right, exactly. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Whereas I know a lot of the guys that I work with, whatever they're supposed to do, they do it. When it's time to leave, they leave. And it tends to be the women who are in the managerial positions who are the ones working overtime, who are the ones staying in later and stuff. And I think that goes back to how unnatural or unhealthy the work life currently is. I don't think we're meant to really work 8 hours a day.
No,
because
definitely
they
not.
tell you you're supposed to work 8 hours a day, not including travel. That's just specifically work.
Yeah.
You're supposed to sleep 8 hours a day. Like,
That's 16 hours out of 24.
Right.
What's left?
Exactly.
With prepping and driving.
that's not including eating, you know, using the bathroom, you know, running errands or whatever the case is. So there's something in there that I think somehow we need to kind of break in order to start living a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I actually think it's starting to happen, or at least people are starting to recognize it. I've spoken to many people where, like, I think they recognize that it's not normal, but the reality is you gotta do what you gotta do to, you know, make ends meet financially. So I understand it. That's another thing too. Because one thing I had to recognize, and to each his own, I don't think this is like across the board where it has to be the case, but with me choosing to stay at home and raise our kids versus hiring a nanny to do it, and I go to work full time, what I realized is making that choice, of course, is not easy. And a lot of people will say, like, I wish I could do that, right? It's not that it's unrealistic for most, but we have to also take accountability and recognize we're making a choice, right? So there are a lot of things that had to change in the transition of that happening for us, right? If anybody knows me, these nails, they love being done. I've been that way since I was younger. I love to get my nails done on an every 2-week basis. My eyebrows got to stay looking good, you know, little things like that. But the reality is when we're making choices, and it doesn't even have to be this specifically, just in general, you start to look at the pros and cons and you make sacrifices, right? So there are a lot of sacrifices that has to be made in the society that we live in now because of finances and the economy. It's not realistic for a lot of families, but I've also noticed that that's not always the case. It's more so people are comfortable in their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I don't blame y'all. I'm not gonna lie. Listen, vacations are great. So most of us are comfortable in our lifestyles and we're not willing to lose it
Right.
for a short period of time to get back on our feet.
Right.
That's a reality that we have to accept too. So while a lot of people are walking around saying it's not realistic, I do think for some it's not. I understand that it's not realistic for some depending on your salary range, but there are salary ranges that are realistic. It's just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So now we have to choose, do we want to be uncomfortable for a while to do the things that we want to do? That's a reality. Or some people choose to keep being uncomfortable in the route of continuing to work corporate and missing out on home so that way they can do it later down the line. There's, whatever works best for you, it works best for you.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is sometimes you have to realize that a choice needs to be made.
Yeah.
Right? A choice needs to be made, and whether it's a choice that you want to admit or not, it's your choice.
Yeah. I think people make
there's sacrifices with both.
I think people make that choice to stay at work or to give their all into work because it's kind of like their only hope, you know, to get financial freedom. And one of the things that I hope people do realize is
it's not the only way.
It's not the only way, but one of the things I hated people saying at work is, "Oh, we're like a family." It's like, no, we're not. No, we're not at all. Because when it comes time to make budget cuts, they will cut you
real quick, huh?
With the quickness.
Facts.
Yeah, they'll
It's
cut you with
true.
the quickness, and they're not going to care about how you're going to feed your kids. They'll do it around the worst time of the year and all that stuff.
That's so true.
Something else that I had to fully learn it and believe is we're not a family. No matter how nice they are, they might take you to lunch once a quarter. They might ask you about your family, show me pictures of your kids and blah, blah, blah. But in the back of my mind, I always remember that this is just work. Like, don't fall for the false hope of making it seem like you're buddy and the company's not going to do you dirty or whatever the case is. And when you have that mindset, I think it kind of forces you to find other avenues to say to yourself, okay, this is clearly not the only way. I've said this in an episode before, but I had a college professor who said, if you think you're going to get wealthy working a 9 to 5, you're not. The system is not set up that way. No matter if you're a doctor,
it don't matter how much you're making,
a lawyer, unless you have your
way.
own practice and you're an entrepreneur technically. But if you're working for someone, you're part of what they call the rat race.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I think millennials are so mentally overburdened is we're in a rat race thinking that we're going to win that race.
Yeah.
And it's not,
I think that's
unfortunately
true.
not the case. Like, we were having a conversation with someone recently, and they were talking about how, they've had to watch people, just like you, who are underqualified, get positions that they were promised or they felt like they should. And it's never a valid reason why they didn't get that position. I think things like that probably happens to everyone at some point, especially if you're the color of our skin. And I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses or anything.
We're not about that life.
Yeah.
But the truth is the truth.
The reality is we're living in a majority white corporate world. I don't judge white people for giving their sons and their cousins, their nephews, positions, because I'm like, if I had my own company and I had a good friend say, hey, my son is looking to, go into this avenue, of course I would.
They have the experience,
right?
Why
Of course
not?
I would push that in.
Yeah.
But I think my problem is giving people the illusion that that's not the case. Because then you have people going all in, trying to get that role, trying to get that position, not knowing in the back of their mind that you were never meant to be in that position. And the same thing with the college life. Like, you give people the illusion that all you got to do is spend 4 years in college, take out massive loans. Don't worry about the loans, because by the time you're working, you're going to be able to make comfortable payments. You'll pay them off. And
The lies.
it's all
Jesus.
It's all an illusion, is what I'm
Right.
saying. I heard someone say this before, who was a comedian. I don't remember his name, but he said they call it the American dream because you got to be asleep to believe it.
Ooh.
So it's time to
That
wake
part.
up. I think it's important to not just wake
that
up, but
part.
to realize that it's a fairy tale that they're trying to sell you.
Yeah, listen, I've learned. Look, I always say, it took me so long to figure it out, but then I think about it, I'm like, yo, there's people still doing it in their 40s and 50s. So
Yeah.
I'm actually, now in this conversation, I'm like, I'm grateful that I was able to figure it out so young. And it's so funny because we say this all the time, how when you're in a certain situation, you don't see a way out. Like, you don't see a reality outside the current reality. And our experience has honestly taught me that sometimes we need to get in a very uncomfortable position to see what other realities are out there
Yeah.
for us. I think that was like a real big lesson for us is realizing like, oh, we actually could get income in different ways. So much so we'll look back and be like, why weren't we doing this before,
why didn't
kids?
I think about this before?
Yeah, like why didn't we do this when like I was still working and, you know, we could have had 3 incomes instead of, you know. But the point I'm trying to make is every choice is a choice, right? Every choice we make is a choice, whether it's you choose to work for corporate or you choose to not go to work for corporate. It's a choice. Now, I'm not saying walk away from y'all income now with no plans, because I'm not about that. Have a plan, sis. But it's a choice nonetheless. Whether you know this is seasonal, I'm doing this for this amount of time frame, and that's going to lead me to this specific place. Have a plan. But also know that get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to myself too. Get out of your comfort zone, because getting out of your comfort zone will force you to see the other options that are out there. Like, think of like a movie when someone's trying to like survive. All of a sudden, like you're looking everywhere like, how can I survive this storm kind of thing? You know? Yeah, like how your brain starts to function differently when you're in survival mode.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to create situations to put ourselves there just a little bit.
Yeah.
So we can then see what's out there. Look outside the window, because sometimes we're so stuck in the current situation that we think that this is the only way out. And you blink and you're 50.
So let's not blink here.
Let's not blink. Okay? You blink and you're 50. Life happens so quick.
I heard a powerful quote that said, you have to destroy your life before you start to build your life. And
look at you with the quote today.
From my experience, I actually believe that's why sometimes God puts you in certain situations, because we're comfortable. There's nothing wrong with being comfortable. If you're
comfort
good,
is
you're
a good thing, yeah.
But sometimes in order to trigger that growth, you have to find yourself in an environment where you get uncomfortable. So you might find that, you know, you just lost your job and you're thinking like, what the heck, out of all times, why now? But sometimes we need that push. You know, you need to be put in an unhealthy, or not unhealthy. You need to put in an environment where you're not comfortable, where you're forced to look around and say, okay, how could I be more resourceful?
And how many people do we know who's been in that situation where like it took them losing a job to start moving in the ways that in reality they should have been moving all along, but being in that space forced them to be like, all right, I got no choice now. I have to do this. You know what I mean? And I think that's what it needs to be. Yeah.
And like you were saying, if you learn how to create those scenarios for yourself, and we're not endorsing just quit your job right now, or whatever the case is.
Please say that again.
But
please do not quit your job. Okay? We are just having a conversation.
If you learn how to how to make yourself grow. So if you learn how to make yourself grow by putting yourself in those uncomfortable environments, I actually learned that it's a life hack. You will find less and less that life starts to put you in that situation, because you're the one that's growing. Life is trying to trigger growth in you. So if you learn how to trigger that growth within yourself, you'll find that you're in more control, because life is less likely to just throw things at you to make you grow. But I think it's important to find opportunities to make you grow. And I think of times where we had to do budget cuts. And all of a sudden we're looking at the market receipts like, why the heck did we buy this? Like, we don't need
why
this.
Were we spending money? Why were we going out so much?
Why we going out so many times? Like,
it's so crazy, because I talked to an old coworker who I used to work in management with. We meet up every now and then, and that's one of the things we talk about pretty often. She's not a friend technically, but we were like, yo, we really were living above our means.
Yeah.
Because she also left corporate around the same time I did to kind of like pursue other things. And we literally were like, we really were living above our means. Check y'all receipts, guys. They trapped us with these debit and credit cards, because you do not recognize how much you're spending when you're not looking at it on a regular basis. Use the cash if you got to, because honestly, checking the receipts was just like, wait, why why did I need that? Spending money on unnecessary stuff. Like you'll find that you can actually cut your payments. I want to say half, but you can cut your payments. Yes, you can cut your payments really low if you pay attention and you start to operate as if you're in a financial struggle. Yeah. That's really what it is. Operate like you're struggling, so that way you can use that excess amount of funds to put into something else to build you. Because that 9 to 5, sis, you ain't going nowhere.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. It's a trap. So hopefully that helped you guys. It's something that we're constantly learning and we're constantly trying to shift to grow in. So yeah.
Yeah. Enough said, I think.
I think enough said too. And we're out. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at Noir Poise Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power.